So the Raspberry Pi has an operating system, which things like Arduino do not. So let's talk a little bit about what you get from having an operating system. The first thing you get is really a user interface. So Arduino, it didn't have a real user interface, not native to it. So what I mean by that is a user can't sit in an Arduino and do something. Not unless you write a program to that effect. But if you just, out of the box, if you get an Arduino, there's nothing you can do with it. You can say, well, let me plug into it and type into it and write a letter on it or something like that, right? A user can't use it. You have to write code and then program it with that code, and then that code maybe does something clever and lets you interact with the device, but it's all on you as a programmer to build that code, right? Without the code that the programmer writes, a human can't use the thing. It just sits there and doesn't do anything, right? Now, if you have an operating system, the operating system itself provides a user interface. So it gives a way for a regular user, to go sit there and give commands to the computer and do basic things without writing any code, okay? The user can just sit there and do things with the computer and get results out, and they don't have to write any code. So that's one benefit of having an operating system. And this is one reason why, Raspberry Pi can be used in ways that the Arduino can't. Now, on the other hand, if that's what you want to do, maybe you should be using a laptop or desktop, not a Raspberry Pi. That's another argument. But you can sit down on a Raspberry Pi and do things and interact with the machine without having to write code. So the user interface is basically two types of user interface. Oh, and I'll mention that the operating system that we're talking about here is a Linux distribution, some type of Linux distribution. Now, the next module we'll talk more fully about Linux and about the Linux that's running on that we expect to be running on a Raspberry Pi. But in general, Linux operating system, you're going to get two possible user interfaces, okay? And this is actually true for any operating system, but in Linux you see it's very prevalent that people use this text-based interface. So on the left you see the text-based interface. Really simple interface, or simple yet complex. Simple in the sense that the bandwidth is pretty narrow. You get a prompt. There's it says Raspberry Pi, whatever it says over there, and this is $. Then you can type. So you as a user, you type in your command, you hit enter, and then it does whatever the command says, right? If you want to see a directory, you type in the appropriate command, it'll show you the contents of the directory, print them out to the screen, and that'll be that, okay? So that's the text-based interface. And so that's one way to go. The other way is a graphic interface, a graphic user interface that you see over there on the right. Now, graphic interface, this will look familiar, probably more familiar to people. All kinds of operating systems have this. This is Linux, one possible graphic user interface from Linux, but this is basically similar to what you would see in a Windows, what you would see in a Mac OS X, right? The same type of interface. Point and click, you got a mouse, you click on things. It's graphic, right? You have icons, all that stuff, pull-down menus, all that. Notice the text-based interface, no pull-down menus, no nothing. You'll note that there's pull down on the top, file edit, but ignore that for a second. That's not part of the interface, the text-based interface for the operating system anyway, not in this sense. So you just type in your commands and it prints out the results, okay? So there are these two interfaces. Now, so you type commands directly into the text base and use a point-and-click interface on the graphics. Oh, before I go on, one thing I'd just like to mention is you might ask, why should I ever go with the text-based interface? Why not always go with the graphic interface? People are very used to the graphic interfaces now. I'll say this, first, the first reason why people use the text-based interface, why it's even available, is because these things started, like Linux came from Unix, and Unix existed before graphic user interfaces existed, okay? So it's just, that's part of the reason why. Like when I was an undergrad, text-based was, they had graphics interfaces, but text-based was what I used, right? And it was much more difficult to use the graphic interface, especially remotely. If you want to use it from home, it was a pain to do the graphic interface from home. You couldn't in a lot of cases. So you got used to the text-based interface. But another good thing about the text-based interface now is that it gives you more control. That is, if you can memorize all the commands, you can do all kinds of things to the operating system. And the graphic user interface, one thing about a graphic user interface, even though it's easier to use, it doesn't present you with all the possibilities, not in a convenient way. So, maybe there's like the way you think about an interface, when you're making a graphic user interface, you say, look, I can only put so many things on the screen graphically for a human to use. So, and the number of things that a human can do with, say, Linux is a lot bigger than the number of things I can put on the screen from my graphic user interface. So they have to make a decision. They say, look, this 10% of things we will put in the screen. We'll have buttons for it and pull downs for it and so forth. The other 90%, that won't be on the screen. That won't be in the interface. And if you want to do that other 90%, you have to go through hoops graphically to do it. Lots of different complicated routes. Where with the text-based interface, they just, all 100% of the features are just right there for you. Now you have to do a decent amount of memorization because you have to memorize the commands. You can ask for help and have books open and stuff like that, but it's not convenient unless you have it memorized. Now I've been using Linux-based machines for a long time, so I have a lot of the commands memorized. I'm very comfortable using a text-based interface. But we're going to mostly in this class stick with the graphic interface just because it's easier for people to get acclimated with. Although some things are easier to do with the text-based interface, and when that's appropriate, we'll bring that up in the course. All right, file system. So what I'm showing here is a way that you might access a file system. You've seen this, okay? You've seen something like this. This is using the graphic user interface of that comes on Raspberry Pi in its Linux. This is its file system interface, what it looks like, and you see a bunch of folders. You can double-click and see files. This type of thing you're used to, right? You've seen this on any Windows or Mac OS or whatever. So this, and you also get the same thing with Linux. So you can use this interface too. But you don't have to. You can use text-based, but this is convenient and people are used to it. Sure, it's very similar. You can create files, directories, that sort of thing. Thank you.